Our features tonight are the Sonny and Cher of Northern California poetry, Connie Post and Kevin Gunn. Connie Post served as Poet Laureate of Livermore, California from 2005 to 2009, long term. Her work has appeared in Calyx, River Styx, Slipstream, Spoon River Poetry Review, Valparaiso Poetry Review, and Verse Daily. Her awards include the La Cura Award, the Crab Creek Review Poetry Award, and the Cesara Award. Her first full-length book, Floodwater, won the Lyrebird Award, and her second full-length collection, also from Glass Lyre Press, entitled Prime Meridian, was released in January 2020 and was a finalist in the Best Book Awards and the American Fiction Awards. About this book, Juan Felipe Herrera says, "We need this wisdom book, clear elixir from the source." Please welcome Connie Post.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. First, congratulations on your 8th anniversary. That's huge. And having been a hostess for a long time, I know what an accomplishment that is. So congratulations, Sandy, for all the work that you do. I'm going to be reading primarily from my book, Prime Meridian, which came out in January 2020. And at the end, though, I do want to throw in some new poems, especially for those of you that have heard. Been reading from Prime Meridian for a year plus now, so you might be, ready to hear some new ones. So the theme of the book really centers on trauma and how it affects what we do to the earth and its effects, and also to the body, and of which I've experienced. And so just kind of that double parallel. I'll start with the opening poem that I think sets the stage for it, Fault Lines. A small earthquake is reported 50 plus miles from where you live. You wonder if that explains why you tripped last night while meandering in your sleep. It's morning. You go to the kitchen, drink dark coffee, and pet the dog. As the day rolls by, you think about a geologist crossing a room, quickly studying spikes and patterns, finding a way to give a numerical value to the Earth's unsettled self. 4.2 has its own meaning, magnitude, years, centuries. As evening descends, you look up facts about tectonic plates and oceanic crusts. You haven't spoken to your family in 15 years. You wonder how much longer a fault line can maintain its own silence. This one is 4 miles from the center of town. What you might notice from some of my poems is that I watch way too many crime shows, which is an agreed upon fact by my family. 4 miles from the center of town, you will find the body at the far side of the field, past the sagging rocks, beyond the milk thistle weeds and the crippled crows. You will need a dog who only responds to sign language. You will need to search only in fall when the dust smothers the trees. You will need a rope so you can tie yourself to a large boulder when the soil caves in. You will need a small camera so you can remember yourself standing there in the smoldering light. You will find the sallow, bent body of the smaller self, you, the barely 13-year-old girl lying lifeless, pretending no one will find her, learning to live in the shallow grave of silence. This one is entitled After Winter. The groundwater is contaminated. The birds are dying for unknown reasons. The moon is choking. The equator is bent. The ozone layer swallows its own tongue. The storm drains fill with acid rain, and the small invisible girl with the small porcelain doll is falling backwards. And all she can do is drink the water she was given. Find the boy who said he wanted to be a cartographer when he grew up, and begin unfolding his bruised hands. We take a lot of walks on a path very close to our house. I've written a lot of poems, and specifically more in the pandemic, because what else was there to do besides go to the grocery store with a mask on and take a walk? So walking beside October. I come across a blue-gray salamander frozen in the middle of the wooden bridge. I step over it and it thanks me by scurrying away. I think of the way I used to stop in the hallway when you'd pass, hoping you would not spill your Jack Daniels down my legs, hoping your shirt buttons were fastened. I remind myself why I take walks at dusk when the sunlight abandons the house. I hear solstice calling me home. I hear the salamander move the weeds aside and run back to the shallow creek bed. I look back and thank this traveler of this small country for teaching me how to move across a rugged terrain without a passport or even a name. The next section, I'll be going more into the meat of the book, of some of the harder stuff. So I call it the Leonard Cohen, the You Want It Darker section. This poem is interesting because this image of flowers on my table when I grew up was in my mind for years, but it took like 30 years for it to actually congeal into a poem. Gardening. After my father would beat one of us, he would place flowers on the kitchen table the next morning. He cut the stems flush and laid the begonias in a circle in an inch of water. The lavender and fuchsia permeated the morning. We were called to breakfast. We ate waffles and said nothing of the raging blooms, the apologies buried in the ordered way the flowers were arranged. We looked down at our plates, eating, gorging, ignoring his sun-scorched hands. These days, I spend time pulling petals out of my body, placing a shovel in the open earth, placing flowers back into the ground. This next one is about my father, and many of you probably know, but in case you don't, that the Korean War was often also named the Forgotten War. Forgotten War. You stumbled around the house through most of the 1970s, sometimes muttering things about Korean girls, young Korean girls I didn't understand. You took long fishing trips to the dark water and wouldn't return until there was no breath left in that lake. I asked Mom about it once. I knew you had been in a war, but didn't understand it had anything to do with your off-center gait, the rage you held in your right shoulder, the passing out at 7 p.m. on the couch. One day, I went to get a popsicle in the garage refrigerator, and you were standing there, one hand as always on the Pabst Blue Ribbon, and I asked, "Did you ever kill anyone in the war?" You went silent and looked away. But I knew already. I knew it in the way you laid the hooked fish on the counter, the way you cut one long line down each body, severing their forgiven skins, taking the eyes out, saying they were a delicacy in other countries. You, seeing in me how relieved I was they could not see you anymore. I knew the lake would someday disavow the fish as I have you. But at times when I drive past a murky lake, I still see us stumbling over the soul-soaked fields of our forgotten war. And soul is spelled S-E-O-U-L, of course. This one is about sisters. It's interesting because our family's really pretty fractured from all that happened. We kind of can't come together on how we see it. So this one is curvature of the spine. And I have 3 older sisters, and we all had scoliosis to some degree or another. I watched it's called curvature of the spine, if I didn't say. Sister, 1 year older than me. I watched the doctors trace lines down your back with an index finger. I watched you bend over time and time again, touch the barren floor as they measured the curve, the stubborn spine, the radiologist telling Mom what to expect, reminding us how a body makes up its mind. The heavy radiation aprons falling from your thin body, your pelvic bones off center. After each checkup, I grasped my own bones at night, making sure they weren't whining out of control. The years passed, the hairbrush beatings got worse. Scoliosis followed you to high school, the awkward braces, the tightening of the bodice around the ribs. How you already understood the language of shallow breath. The only time you were allowed to take off the brace was bedtime. I watched you unlace each strap, and the sores from abrasion, the pulling, spoke like ancient rubbings from a cave wall. I never said a thing as you snuck quietly into the bed next to me. You always turned off the lamp first. I waited for night to be over, for contrition. I waited until I heard your steady, full breath, as if you already knew that our survival was curving into itself. My mom in the 60s used to bring in extra money, iron people's clothes for a living. So this one. Iron will. When the years were lean, my mother ironed the clothing of others to make ends meet. She pressed through the day when my father was gone working 2 jobs. I watched her smooth the history out of a rumpled seam. As the steam rose from the fabric, I understood how precision lives the quiet life of rage. I asked her often, when are you going to be done? But she never answered. The days bled into years of beatings, followed by the imperative seance of silence. I left home young, my car full of short skirts and wrinkled blouses. As the decades passed, I turned away, but sometimes I still see her standing there, fastening a floral apron, tripping on the cord of her own life, rising, falling, putting garments back on their hangers, adjusting the collars, following the crease lines, just so. Next one, once you are traumatized and you get away from your family, sometimes the years pass and you just get this different perspective of you decide if you made it or not made it and how that feels to have the distance from it. So this one is Coastal College Town. I leave the hotel room early, looking for a small cafe. My husband in bed, the sheets half off. Emerge onto the same freeway of 30 years ago, the same one who took me away from home. I'm wondering again if I got everything from the garage, the sheets from the closet, the letters you stole from me, pictures of myself in grade school. I knew I would never return, and you knew it too. But the fog breaks and I find a place where the locals go. On my way out, I throw $1 in the tip jar. On the way back to the hotel, I find a hidden easement between the small beach cottages. I find a few narrow steps, each slightly covered with sand, each a geology of fine gravel and salient sorrow. I think I did get everything. I think mostly about the sorcery of the word whore, your voice low and moist in the back of my ear. How every day, decades later, I am thankful for small easements, how the fog suddenly lifts itself from an old road. I have a lot of poems about birds, so I'll read a couple of them. But I'm going to do those, and then I'll go to a couple other ones. We have a path, like I was mentioning, and out on that path many years ago, there was this bird that was dying on this tree trunk for a long time, and it really bothered me. How to watch a bird die. Take the dog out early in the morning and notice the same eucalyptus, how the crow is still perched, half frozen on the same midpoint of the tree. Notice how the claws are stuck and how the back of your neck seems damp and full of sunlight all at once. Each day, tell yourself it will be over soon. Tell yourself that's just the way nature works. Tell yourself it's intrusive to do anything else. Urge the dog to walk closer to you instead of pulling you back to the tree over and over. Remind yourself you have to get back and make breakfast. Imagine how peaceful a bird looks when it's finally melting into the dirt. Imagine the ground is atonement and the murder of crows just taking flight are finally free of sin. This next one is called Infatuation, and it's a kind of an examination of silence. And I can't speak for all of you, but during the pandemic, I think that we've kind of had a different kind of silence that we've had to examine, more alone time, those kinds of things. My watch is binging, so I'm going to have my husband take that and put it on my dresser. Thanks. It's nice to have a husband close by. This one is called Infatuation. I am in love with silence, the way it can fracture a room, how it moves across the stairway through you as if you wore the wrong dress. I step in and out of the false quiet as if it is a kept woman, as if it understands the agreements of entrance and exit. I hold its hand only when convenient, only behind the champagne table when no one else is looking. I act as if the wooden beams of the ceiling are not falling. I pretend this room was not built on a fault line. I pretend the plates of language have not slipped like a loose jawbone, and I am not standing here bracing myself in a doorway already collapsing. So this is the part where you put too many poems in case you run short, and then you skip through a bunch of them when you find the ones you want to read. I'll put that one at the end. So I'm going to actually read a couple of new poems for those of you that have heard me read a lot from Meridian. This one is in a newer manuscript that I'm working on, and it's entitled Entwined. Your history is tied around your waist like a rope. You fling yourself over the water, but the tire swing beckons you back. You find a foothold. You don't find a foothold. It's always the same. The gravity, the incessant gravity pulling you. You land wherever the rope comes loose. You curse the murky water for hiding the tadpoles with the broken tails, the moss that smothers your thoughts. Nobody on the far edge of the lake sees you. You go under. You become the body of water you once hated. You are alone. You are not alone. You are the hue of an unseen self. The water surrounds you like the selective mutism you had in second grade. The photosynthesis keeps you holy while you wait. I've had a couple of bad tire swing experiences. There was a woman in my life named Rita who became like my real mother when I was 18 years old, when I went out on my own. And this is about my feelings about thinking about her house after she passed and I took care of her estate. Dwelling. The money for the house sale landed in your bank account today. I saw the dollar figure and thought only of a small yellow house down a long gravel road in Yuba County. I've saved all your paintings and the portraits you did not finish. I've saved all the letters your parents wrote to you in the 1950s. I don't visit your grave often enough. I trip over the divots when the grass is wet and land face forward in places I am not welcome. I've saved the last $7 from your wallet. It's the only part of your estate that has not been inventoried. I called the water company to cancel your account and they told me the new family is already living there. I see them washing their hands in your stainless steel sink. I see them opening the front door when the sun comes up. I see them stacking firewood for the long winter ahead. She's always with me. Okay, I'm going to do Lent. I'm a recovering Catholic, and I like to take concepts and put like just a different spin on them. So it's a short poem, Lent. I'm giving up breathing for Lent. It should be easy. My rib cage has been begging me for a rest. My lungs are collapsing at the weight of dirty penance. My throat can go quiet now and say its last prayer. There are 40 days I will go unnoticed, 40 doctors who will call time of death, 40 death certificates handwritten in the salt of earth. Each will give me a different reason for my demise. And at the end of the season, I will stand in the hallway of this broken church and pretend I am no longer hungry. My grandson is always telling me how hungry he is and he can't wait 5 minutes. I'm like, please. I had to fast all day on Friday. I waited like all the way. I just fast for 12 hours a row when I was a kid so I can get communion. So we laugh at it. A couple more. Ornithology. This is one of my last bird ones. Ornithology is the title. I want to freelance in the eve of birds, not fly or soar or carry the strength of wind. I want to know how to find the thin power lines, how to balance when the flock leaves you behind, how to identify the noises of departure. I want to know how to find the distance from branch to soil and how to atone for the loss of gravity. I want to learn to become an unencumbered silence and extract autumn from each weary leaf. I want to be statue-like in the depleted dawn. I want you to understand why I bathe myself in the ruined twilight. I have a very complicated relationship with birds because sometimes they really creep me out and then I have to figure out why. And I try to make some sort of a little higher meaning out of it. That's what poets do, right? I'm going to close with the poem, Omen. But before I do, I've been telling you about my grandson, and one of the things was teaching him this week about poems is I said, all you need to remember is we're writing about one thing, it's really about another thing. And then that really seemed to resonate with him. So the last poem is, I feel, very redemptive for the manuscript, and it's about a complicated relationship I had with a black squirrel in my back that frequented our backyard for about 3 years, Omen. For 3 years, the black squirrel visits our backyard. I say I hate it. It doesn't look right. I read in science magazines that it's a mutation, a normal occurrence in nature, but every day I think it's a bad omen. Every day I encourage the dogs to run after him. I watch his whirling, curling ascent up the tree, and I find relief as he moves away from me into the next yard. Winter passes through me. A close friend my age dies of a brain tumor. I do not wear black to the funeral. Later that week, I step outside at mid-afternoon and I see the black squirrel sitting quietly by our pond. Our eyes meet, and for that split second, I see how I have banished the secret body within the body. I see his small heart pulsing, how sorrow fills a cavern and keeps beating. Thank you. My husband's gonna, he's the kind of funny, humorous poet, and I'm obviously the darker poet. So now it's time to go the yin to the yang. Sandy, take it away. I'm gonna
Thank
step
you
out
so
of the throne
much.
area here, and he can sit here.
We're going to take a little stop